Deep inside a heavily monitored laboratory, surrounded by precision analog instruments, Robert Monroe quietly logged the precise mechanics of his out-of-body experiments. At exactly 3:40 a.m., Monroe cleanly detached from his physical form and drifted into the gray haze of the intermediate area. There, he encountered a non-human entity designated BB-KT-95, waiting motionless in the dark mist. The entity was in mourning. Its companion, AA, had plunged deep into the Earth reincarnation cycle, a process that coats an awareness in layers of biological memory and survival instinct, so dense the original identity becomes unrecognizable to those who haven't experienced it. Monroe recognized the danger. Without a primer on the mechanics of human life, BB would have no way to find or even communicate with his companion when AA finally emerged from that weight of experience. Reluctant to return alone, BB proposed a compromise. Monroe would act as a guide, providing a fast tour of human existence so BB could observe the process without the risk of permanent incarnation. Monroe began with the single baseline imperative that dictates all biological human behavior. Before any other thought can exist, a physical body demands survival. This hierarchical data chart illustrates the human operating system. A massive baseline drive to stay alive commands nearly all available energy. It rapidly drowns out secondary functions like philosophical abstraction or complex logic. To understand humanity from the outside, an observer must first accept that almost every human action, no matter how obscured, is rooted in the desperate, continuous need to maintain a pulse. Monroe guided the entity down through the energy rings, coming to rest in an isolated rural environment to observe these biological needs devoid of societal masking. Maintaining cellular energy requires the constant consumption of organic matter. Here, a human tracks, kills, and extracts resources directly from the local wildlife. BB recoiled in shock. Having never occupied a biological form, the entity misinterpreted the natural food chain as senseless, chaotic violence. Monroe explained that the physical environment is hostile. Humans must extract further resources, stone, wood, and animal skins, to construct heavy thermal protection against the cold. Inside the shelter, a man and woman engaged in the reproductive act. Monroe clarified the mechanics for his observer. Nature ensures the species persists by wiring this biological requirement to produce intense physical pleasure, guaranteeing humans will willingly repeat it. Actions that appeared to the non-physical observer as horrific violence or raw animal impulse were simply nature's ruthlessly efficient mechanics for keeping physical copies alive. Monroe then shifted the observation upward into extreme density, dropping them directly onto 42nd Street and Broadway. The sheer volume of people generated what Monroe called the M-band noise. It was a deafening, chaotic frequency produced by millions of humans, radiating raw, uncontrolled emotional energy all at once. This flowchart maps modern survival. Physical labor converts to currency, traded for biological necessities. The friction of millions competing to exchange labor generates massive, erratic emotional radiation. This continuous cycle floods the spectrum, creating an overload that overwhelms non-physical visitors. The neon infrastructure of Times Square operates on the exact same biological imperative as the stone hut. It is simply a denser, highly volatile complication of the basic survival drive. Without warning, an emergency recall signal triggered in the laboratory. Monroe was abruptly yanked backward through the energy rings at high speed, snapping back into his physical body and temporarily stranding his companion in the city. Returning to the non-physical state later that evening, Monroe reconnected with BB. Together, they dropped into the earthbound ring, a frequency existing just out of phase with physical reality. Here, the newly dead wandered the streets. Entirely unaware they no longer possessed biological bodies, these forms attempted to satisfy lingering chemical cravings by begging for phantom drugs or reaching for discarded cigarettes they could not hold. The human imprint leaves a heavy residue. A consciousness can remain trapped by the intense gravity of physical desires long after the biological machinery meant to satisfy them has expired. Monroe moved the study upward. Shedding the dense gravity of the earthbound rings, they observed the psychological environments constructed by those who realized they had moved on. They encountered Charlie, a deceased engineer. Using only sustained, focused thought, he had successfully designed and manifested an entire physical ecosystem, a log cabin overlooking a white-capped ocean under a handcrafted sunset. Higher up, they found massive architectural forms built entirely from deeply ingrained religious expectations. Entire congregations of the departed gathered inside vaulted cathedrals, waiting patiently for a higher power to call them forward. Even in the absolute freedom of a non-physical environment, human consciousness instinctively rebuilds the familiar cages, hierarchies, and rules it relied upon on Earth before it feels secure enough to move forward. Arriving at the outermost ring, Monroe introduced BB to Bill, a non-physical guide who observed the entirety of the human system from a quiet distance. To Bill, the M-band noise, the chaotic, emotional friction generated by millions of humans competing for survival, wasn't a waste of energy. It was the raw fuel for the entire human machine. Bill explained that the Earth cycle acts as a filter. It takes that raw, violent emotional friction we witnessed in the city and processes it over thousands of years and millions of lives until the frequency is refined into what humans call love. The scale of that effort, the millions of years of predatory survival and M-band noise required to filter out that single frequency, hit the entity with the force of a physical impact. BB finally understood the staggering cost AA was currently paying to achieve that state. The psychological weight was too great. BB KT-95 turned inward and shut down entirely, overcome by total non-physical shock. Bill gently reassured Monroe and sent him home. Returning to his physical body in the isolation booth, Monroe processed the events of the night. He suspected the perfect timing and sequence of the entire encounter had been carefully arranged by the guides long before he ever left his body. The chaotic, painful laboratory of physical existence serves a precise function. It is a highly efficient forge, intentionally designed to process raw survival instinct into a single transcendent outcome.